Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. I'm Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, and my pronouns are he, him. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 53, Vologases I.
This one is
the first
promising.
of many Vologases.
Please. Okay, so hopefully that means that people like the name because he was great. You have told me that I can look forward to this episode. I am so excited to get out of wherever the hell we are in right now.
Yes, this is basically the inauguration of a new period of Parthian history. And we'll see why, and if it's a good period.
I hope so. I also, disclaimer to anyone listening, if I sound a bit sick, it's because I am. It's just a cold. But,
Fair.
Figured I'd let you know.
And yeah, mild spoilers, we get all the way to a Vologases VI at some point later on.
Okay.
Technically a 7th if you consider linguistic drift. But,
Okay.
we'll not consider that numbering. The next guy will just be Balash. But, we'll see.
Interesting.
Because, the fact is that we've moved so far along that languages have changed. And also something that Trevor from History of Persia told me during our intelligent speech panel, which I thought was cool, is that apparently the Parthian language is the descendant of the Median language from back in the Median Empire. So apparently they've kind of been back for a while. Although, hundreds of years later. So that's neat. But so I think we can start with a recap of what happened in the last couple kings, and then we can get started with Vologases himself.
Let's go.
Yes, if we remember last times, we had Vardanes and Gotarzes, the two brothers, fighting each other for control of the empire. The nobles were supporting one person first, then another person later. Gotarzes had his brother killed, then Gotarzes fought with Meherdates, which was a Roman pretender off in the west. He won, but then eventually died of whatever reasons we don't really know. And that brought to last episode, where the nobles elected Vonones II, i.e. a random old guy, to become king. And as Tacitus told us, Vonones had a short, inglorious, and perfunctory reign. The end.
Yeah.
That left a
he
new
was
person.
there. Thank you.
Yes.
Next.
And Vonones was also there. The end. But the good thing is that, Vonones ruled for long enough that his son, Vologases, managed to make himself elected king at last. So let's see how well that goes. So, Vologases I was the son, or some sources say brother of Vonones II, but based on his age, more likely that he was the son, because he doesn't die 6 months into his reign, so that's good. So he was probably the son of Vonones II and a Greek concubine. And we can presume he was born sometimes at the beginning of the century, which means that by the time he becomes king, he is in his early 50s. Which means that he's had time to establish himself, gain a lot of skill in ruling, and also, presumably during the reign of his father, he managed to take a co-ruler role and managed to learn how to administer the empire and which nobles to talk to because, he was previously relatively unknown and he gets elected king. So, he was persuasive enough that people thought, he'd do a good job. Let's go for it. We're also told that he has two brothers, one called Pacorus and another called Tiridates. You'll want to remember them both, and Tiridates most importantly.
Okay. I am intrigued. I shall.
Do you have high hopes or low hopes for his brothers?
Well, I don't know. I feel like either I will get to know them because they will come back and it will be like for ruling, and so we'll, get their own episode, or I have to remember because of the drama because they're going to be like a problem. Capital P. Either way, I'm happy. about it, so.
We can find out. And yeah, it also, interestingly, it looks like, according to the wording in Tacitus, Vologases wasn't the eldest brother.
Oh.
But he was just the one that was chosen to be King of Kings.
Interesting.
So we can see if anybody resents that.
Yeah, I mean, why, what do you mean? Everyone, we're all adults here. We can be normal about these decisions and not lose our mind.
Yeah, nobody has to die. We can all just accept things.
Exactly, yeah. What are you talking about, really?
And so, in the year 51, at the death of Vonones, Vologases is crowned King of Kings, and the most surprising thing of all is that we have no reports of anybody challenging the succession. So he either managed to secure his succession during his father's brief reign, which seems reasonable.
Why not?
Or he was also just so respected and trusted as a man that nobody, not even the nobles, could think, here's an alternative ruler. Everybody thought, no, Vologases, you're the one for the job. You do this, please. Although an alternative view, which I don't really trust that much, but, I found it suggested, is that he was actually the one behind the murder of Gotarzes II and then took power in a coup.
Well, first of all, how is that relevant? Because he's still, whether he killed him or not, he still made himself, be chosen successor.
Yeah.
So that doesn't discredit the fact that, he was qualified enough or, charming enough or who knows why, that he was voted as successor. So that doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, the man was old. The sources also tell us that he was, I don't think a murder was necessary.
Yeah, I don't really trust this source very much. It feels like Vologases had all the cards to just become king, and since nobody opposes him, if it was a coup, you'd feel like there was an alternative side of the family trying to screw him over, but if it was just a regular succession and everybody trusted him, then makes sense that things would be a lot cleaner.
I mean, of course, we only have the sources that we have, and it would be, if you did something shady like that, you probably would want to change the sources.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It might be a Darius situation where, he killed everybody and just
that's always
king.
The case. We might be going off of, wrong information, especially if you don't have much to compare.
We just have so much information to go for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, you remember that Vologases had two brothers. What do you think happens to those brothers as soon as Vologases becomes king?
I know he doesn't immediately kill them, because you told me to remember.
But does he try to kill them?
Well, I don't know. It depends if he's following the footsteps of this previous king. What was his name? Who murdered his entire family, but then was very successful, but then was like, oh, I have no heirs because I murdered my entire family.
Yeah, Artaxerxes III, that happened.
Yes. I don't know. I don't know what kind of king he's going to be. If he's going to be the, intelligent and merciful one, I would say he probably gives them, a small part of the empire they can rule over. If he's going to be the powerful, murderous kind, then he probably tries to immediately murder them, or at least banish them.
Well, he goes for the intelligent and merciful route.
I love this. I am already rooting for him.
Yes. Vologases has seen that the empire has been in one civil war or another since the end of Artabanus III's reign. And even then, Artabanus III's reign was a blip of stability after, the chaos that started with Musa's succession. So, the empire hasn't been doing great in the first half of the 1st century. It's been a lot of successions. And Vologases thinks that, okay, he can't just entirely snub his brothers, he needs to make sure that they have positions. And he wants to make sure that they are allied and friends. So he gives his brother Pacorus the kingdom of Media Atropatene, which was the kingdom of their father, and, it's a nice, relatively important kingdom at the edge of the empire. Nothing huge, but still, it's important enough that you'll feel relevant. But then he needs a position for his youngest brother, Tiridates. Now, Cyril, can you imagine what kingdom Vologases wants to give to his younger brother?
Is it Armenia?
Yes, it is.
Do we have it now to give?
No, we don't.
Okay,
that's part of the
as always,
issue.
we're just like, yes, and this part of the land, instead of just letting it, we're just gonna reclaim it again. It's none of our business, but we are gonna make it our business once more.
Yes, my brother needs a job, so I'm going to conquer Armenia for him.
I can't. I'm
he can
losing my
get it.
mind. I cannot. Like, who made this game? Who made this simulation? Who decided that this is how it's going to work?
It might just be Tigranes the Great's fault for just making Armenia a thing. Otherwise, it would have just been squished between the empires, but no, it's there.
I can't.
So, let's look at the situation in Armenia, because they have a succession crisis. Because the king of Iberia was the brother of the Armenian king that the Romans had put in power. Now, the king of Iberia sent his son, a man called Radamistus, to invade Armenia and take over. And there, the Iberians managed to bribe the Roman forces protecting the Armenian king, who was then murdered, and Radamistus became king at last. But the Roman forces weren't really coordinating with each other, and the bribes didn't go to all the correct people. So, some private rivalries saw several important Romans defect to the new king of Armenia, and letters from Rome, from the new emperor Nero, just said, guys, stop, please, no, seriously, guys, come on. No, stop, and no armies. Well, the fact is that now Radamistus, the king of Armenia, hasn't signed any treaties with the Romans. The old king did. So he's technically illegitimate from the Roman point of view.
Of course, because they always are like, oh, but this was with the previous guy. It's not like, there's a succession and then the new guy, inherits and controls all that the previous guy did. Because that wasn't in the contract. I hate the Romans. I hate them. I feel like they would be so annoying to take to court.
Yes. To be fair, they would also make the laws so that they're in charge, which is what they did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they did
follow
invent
Roman law. Is there any other law?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
They invented Roman law, so and we still teach this. So.
Yeah. So the thing is that back in the days of Augustus and Phraates IV, it was agreed that the Romans could appoint the Armenian king, but Radamistus is not a Roman-appointed king, so Vologases is free to invade without the Romans being able to say anything. Because, well, the Romans didn't appoint him, it's not your man, you can't legally attack me, so let's go. So, great, let's start. Vologases begins his invasion with Armenia to place his brother Tiridates on the throne. He starts by taking several important cities without much resistance, but is then eventually forced to stop because winter comes in, and, well...
You don't fight in winter. What are you, mad?
Yeah. Also, Armenia is full of mountains and snows and tight mountain passes. You don't want to go through there in winter. That means that you will soon be disappearing into the snows.
I mean, you're free to try. The war will be decided then.
Yes. At the same time, the nobles in the vassal kingdom of Adiabene had grown tired of their king. Now, you remember that the king of Adiabene was the guy that saved Artabanus III's throne and also defied Vardanes regarding his invasion of Armenia. He's still around. He's still there. And well, this king asks Vologases for help to get his throne back. Now, this is an important kingdom to control because it has one of the key crossings of the Euphrates River, which would be very important in case the Romans ever get frisky. So Vologases demands that the vassal kingdom surrender the privileges it gained from Artabanus III. And this almost came to battle, but during the negotiations, Vologases got news that nomads were invading in the east, so he had to withdraw without a real fight. In the end, the king of Adiabene died of old age, so it doesn't really matter, and the kingdom was returned to the fold and reabsorbed into the Parthian Empire proper, so that's nice. But while he was off in the east, there were problems in Armenia, because the Armenian nobles saw that Radamistus, their king, was failing at resisting an invasion, and so he was expelled by his own people in favor of Tiridates. And in his escape, his pregnant wife was apparently too slow, so she asked him to stab her rather than be captured.
Oh, God.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
So he stabbed her and dropped her into a river. But she lived.
God. Like, this is just... It's horrible. Like, dramatically horrible from her point of view of, like, I'm just holding you back. Just let me go. Yes. It's then horrible of him to, like, agree. And then it's even more horrible because, like, she was hurt, like, wounded, and with baby, and she didn't die.
No.
But she was still thrown into a river, like...
Icy cold river in winter. Not fun. But the good news is that she is found by some shepherds. And these lovely shepherds think, where should we bring the Queen of Armenia? Let's bring her to the new King of Armenia, Tiridates. Here, have the Queen.
Oh no. Oh no.
And apparently Tiridates treated her very kindly and tended to her wounds and married her before becoming formally King of Armenia, with his claim strengthened by marriage now, because, well, there we go.
Okay, well, it's not like I don't know how her marriage with the original King of Armenia was, if that was, like, at all her choice or not, because that's how this goes.
Yeah.
I guess... good thing that she was treated nicely, you know?
Yeah, I guess Tiridates didn't stab her, so that's a good start.
Yeah. Like, knowing how things went and how it could have ended up, which is with her dead one way or another, I guess that's better. And I'm glad that Tiridates, like, treated her nicely and didn't just, like... Because those shepherds, like... bold move.
Yes.
But I guess maybe they didn't necessarily care for her well-being. They cared more about for their own, what they should do.
Yeah, presumably there was a reward. It's not mentioned,
or like
if
you
you
would
hand
be considered
over
a traitor if you hide them, you know.
Same.
Or maybe they were good people who were like, well, the only people who can, like, ensure that you will be treated, like, medically and saved is the people who have power right now. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but she makes it. She's Queen of Armenia.
Yeah.
And the great news is that now in 54, Vologases finally has Armenia. It's basically in the empire. His brother's on the throne. Hooray. Good news. But the problem is that in that same year, there is a change in Roman emperor. Because Emperor Claudius, who had sort of ineffectually made some vague noises in the direction of Armenia saying, hey guys, no, stop it. He is poisoned and replaced with his young stepson, Emperor Nero.
This goes great, guys. In case, you're not familiar with the Roman Empire, this goes wonderfully.
Yes.
We love neckbeard Nero.
Yeah. The quote-unquote good news is that this is still in Nero's early phase when he's controlled by people who are much smarter and better equipped than him to rule an empire.
Actually qualified.
Yeah, there's his mother, his teacher Seneca, and the leader of the Praetorian Guard who are all restraining his worst impulses right now.
Okay, it's not terrible then.
So what do these people all decide? They decide that it's time to declare the first official war between Rome and Parthia since Mark Antony. So they're fully escalating the war into... It's not just everybody fighting against the Armenians, pretending we're not really fighting each other. It's now, we're just fighting each other and then we'll see who wins Armenia at last. And command of the Roman expedition is given to an experienced general from Germania called Gnaeus Corbulo, who began gathering and training about 6 legions from the west and carried them off towards Armenia. At the same time, it looks like there was a strange situation. The sources make it unclear because the Latin is Filius Vardanis, so we're unclear if it is Vologases' son called Vardanes or a son of the previous king Vardanes. We don't know. Anyway, this man revolted against Vologases, and Vologases quickly put down the rebellion.
Okay.
To try and deal with these rebels and stop the war with Rome from escalating, Vologases gave some hostages, although Tacitus suggests it was some political rivals, to the Roman general Corbulo to have some peace for a while longer, to maintain the situation stable. It's not really clear what this rebellion that is happening in the Parthian Empire is like. We get some rebel coins from Seleucia, which suggest that maybe the Western nobles are supporting the usurper, and given their usual Roman sympathies, maybe the Romans encouraged this rebellion. But yeah, we don't really know. It's kind of messy, but the situation is slightly unstable around Armenia. But at last, the Romans finally get ready, and once they are prepared in winter of 57, Corbulo decides to march into Armenia, which wasn't a great plan because it was winter.
As we've said before.
Yes.
Like, maybe don't do that.
Yeah, it was so cold and so horrible that many of his men lost limbs to the cold, and there was tons of desertion as everybody just decided to leave. And the only way Corbulo managed to stop these desertions was by threatening any deserter with execution, and that slowed things a little bit but didn't fully stop them. So, by the time spring arrives, the Romans had been decimated by
just
the elements and their own execution. And the large Roman armies then harassed and raided by the Armenian forces of Tiridates and the Parthian forces of Vologases, who now work together knowing the mountain passes, and they hunt down all these Romans. But the problem is that this eventually forced the Romans under Corbulo to change their strategy and split up their forces to pillage the country. So they're not going to look for a big final battle, they're just going to burn and pillage and make a desert and call it peace, as Romans are wont to do. And yeah, the problem is that this ended up being quite effective because Vologases also had to deal with a rebellion in the east. There was a rebellion in Hyrcania, possibly a distant relative of the Arsacid family or a distant relative of Gotarzes II, whose children hadn't taken the throne, we're not sure. But Vologases is forced to go all the way east and has to find a way to deal with the eastern side of the empire. This is also probably because there's now a Kushan empire in the east, which was formed by the Yuezhi Confederacy from a while ago, and it's taken over Bactria. So we have only limited Chinese sources mentioning a conflict between Parthia and the Kushans over Afghanistan, but we don't really know what's going on exactly. We just know that Vologases' forces have to go all the way east to try and fight these enemies. What we do know from the Romans is that eastern envoys go all the way to Rome in search of an alliance. And apparently they were sent home through the Red Sea to avoid crossing Parthian territory, which suggests that they had to cross the Kushan Empire to get back home, which means that this new empire was causing problems for Parthia. So with this whole messy situation with Parthia having to deal with wars in the east and in the west, Armenia being iffy, led to some negotiations between Tiridates and the Romans. Because as king of Armenia, he asked the Romans, "Why are you invading me? You have no legal right to be here. We provided hostages. We can just discuss this without violence. How about we do that?" And the Romans replied that Tiridates should surrender and submit to Nero's judgment, who would choose the rightful king of Armenia. To which Tiridates replied that if the Romans wanted violence, the Arsacids would be a worthy adversary. So, it's fighting time. Negotiations break down entirely. The Romans then attacked a series of smaller Armenian cities and executed all the men, enslaving all the women and children like the good guys they are.
Of course, yeah, that's how you can tell that that's the good guys. Always, of course.
Yes. If the blood sports hadn't convinced you they were the good guys, this will convince you certainly. But the Romans then moved on to the Armenian capital of Artaxata, where Tiridates didn't really have enough men to withstand a siege. So he first attempted to break the Roman formation and attack them with cavalry, but Corbulo kept his men organized, so Tiridates was forced to flee his capital, forced to flee his kingdom, and seek refuge with Vologases. So now Armenia is mostly in Roman hands, because the Romans enter the capital Artaxata, they spare the population this time, but burned the city to the ground and tore down its walls. They then proceeded to the second city of Armenia, called Tigranocerta, which was founded by Tigranes the Great.
I imagined, yeah.
Yes. But the thing is that they're constantly attacked by several ambushes along the way, because despite King Tiridates being away, they still prefer someone else to the Romans. And once the Romans arrived to Tigranocerta, the city refused to surrender to them. To try and discourage a lengthy resistance, the Roman general Corbulo executed an Armenian noble he had captured, and then made sure to catapult his head into the city, where it landed in the middle of a war council where the city council was discussing what to do. And the landing of a head in their midst made everybody quickly surrender and hand over the city to the Romans in the end. Poor Tiridates, now without his kingdom, then tried to take back Armenia, but there was no real success. So, with Armenia fully in Roman hands now, Nero gave some of the lands of the kingdom to his allies, and then appointed a new king of Armenia, and made Corbulo governor of Syria, while leaving some legionaries to support the new Armenian king. So things aren't looking great right now, and the new Roman king of Armenia, a man called Tigranes, started to raid the Parthian vassal kingdom of Adiabene. But now finally, it seems like the war in the east ended for Vologases. So he manages to put his full attention on the west.
Nice.
Yes, this is probably for a couple reasons. Because, well, first of all, the war in the east was winding down, so he could leave it to some subordinates.
Yeah, first of all, the war was actually ending.
Yes, that's good. And second, because the original war was sort of limited. It was Romans and Parthians fighting over Armenia. It wasn't a direct attack on Parthia. But now this Roman vassal, king of Armenia, is attacking Parthia directly. And this can't really stand. Finally, Tiridates, his brother, was annoyed that he'd lost his kingdom and hadn't really gained much support from his brother. And he was pointing out to the nobles that, hey, if he didn't have the kingdom of Armenia, he might have another kingdom, who knows? So trying to avoid the nobles from overthrowing him, Vologases decided, okay, no, I need to give my brother a kingdom. I'll get him Armenia. We can do this. So off we go. Vologases called a council of nobles to re-establish Tiridates' right to the Armenian throne. He said that he was hoping for a diplomatic solution. He would do his duty by protecting his brother's claim. And then he finishes up the speech by giving Tiridates a diadem and saying, "At last, you can rule."
At last.
He then assigns one of his underlings, one of his generals, to fight off Armenian forces and hold the fort in Armenia, while Vologases himself will attack Syria, with the main force since the Romans are using 5 legions to secure all the important crossings along the rivers. So things starts off ambivalently, because Vologases' subordinate manages to besiege the Roman king of Armenia, Tigranes, in his capital. But this was a really long siege, because the city was well supplied, and the Parthian supplies start to be destroyed by locusts. So we're holding on, but it's not great. And at the same time, the Romans threatened an invasion of Mesopotamia, and offered to negotiate with Vologases. So Vologases thought, okay, things are getting risky, the invasion isn't going super well, so he sent some ambassadors to Rome to discuss possession of Armenia, but the Romans, of course, will only agree if they keep all of Armenia, and the deal goes nowhere. So at last, we start to prepare for battle. And with the Roman armies preparing, they get some bad omens.
Nice, I like omens.
Yes, because apparently the horse carrying the consular insignia for the army freaked out and ran off. So that's a bad sign. A sacrificial animal broke out of its pen and ran amok. And fire danced on the Roman javelins, apparently a sign of danger from Parthian arrows. We're not sure how, but still, it happened. So all of this, not great news for the Romans. But despite all these omens, they decided to strike first. They wanted to relieve the Armenian capital from the Parthian force besieging it, on the one hand, and they also wanted to cross into Mesopotamia and the south with Corbulo himself. So seeing that the main Roman invasion force was coming through Syria into Mesopotamia, Vologases left Mesopotamia to the commanders of his forts and allowed Corbulo to take the first crossings on the Euphrates. But he did this to stop the Roman forces from joining up, because now we had one Roman force in the south and one in Armenia, and Vologases rushed north to try and overwhelm the Roman force in Armenia to divide and conquer.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Corbulo is an intelligent man, so he realizes this, that he's about to be outflanked.
We did not keep this into account.
No, we did not expect a smart Roman. It happens. So Corbulo left a garrison on the Euphrates to hold the crossings and then rushed north to try and catch up to Vologases' main army. But Vologases was too quick for him. Vologases managed to arrive in Armenia, surround the Roman army there, and after lengthy negotiations, he managed to have them entirely surrender and captured them all when Corbulo's army was only 3 days' march away.
Well,
so at last, this northern Roman army has been defeated. Several legions have been disbanded.
Fun.
And at the surrender, Vologases wasn't alone. He was there present with his brothers Tiridates and Pacorus to show that this victory was not just for Parthia, but it was for the whole Arsacid dynasty.
Nice.
And the Arsacid dynasty owns Armenia. Let's do this.
I love this, actually.
Yeah.
I love this collaboration between the family members being like, yeah, no, we are together. We do this together.
Yeah, they're not fighting again. They're not doing this civil war thing anymore. We're now united.
Amazing.
And yeah, at the surrender, the terms of the deal were that the Romans would have to abandon all their forts and supplies in Armenia and withdraw their armies. And at the same time, in the meantime, in this new situation, Vologases would talk to Nero and they would negotiate over the kingship of Armenia. They would decide how do things work now.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure he will be a reasonable man.
Yes. Also, apparently Vologases asked the Roman general to build a bridge across a nearby river into Roman territory, apparently just because he could. And then, as a power move, Vologases crossed the river on an elephant to show, look at me, I can cross your rivers. Ha ha.
Yeah. Like, I don't care. I don't need your stupid bridges.
Yeah, it's fine. It's me. Yeah, so looks like peace has been established. Let's see how long it lasts.
Well, fun. Yeah, let's find out.
Because on the way back, the Roman general who had surrendered to Vologases encountered Corbulo, who was just 3 days away. And he tries to convince Corbulo to break the treaty and fight back. But Corbulo thought, if we break our treaties as soon as we make them, that's the easiest way to make every treaty worthless, and nobody will ever trust us again. So how about we don't?
It is a good point,
Yeah. Also, it looks like Corbulo didn't respect this other general because he thought he was just a useless crony of Nero's, just sent over to keep an eye on him. So he thought, no, let's not do this. This sounds really dumb.
Yeah.
But then Vologases manages to discuss with Corbulo and they strike another deal for peace. Corbulo will abandon his forts east of the Euphrates, so leave his conquests, and at the same time, the Parthian army will leave Armenia, and Armenia will be quote-unquote neutral, but under Vologases' brother.
Yeah.
So, neutral but Parthian.
Yes, the kind of neutral that we like.
Yeah, neutral
but ours. Which is still ours. Yeah.
So then ambassadors, Jessica, was sent to Rome.
Oh, Jessica.
And proposed that Tiridates should become king of Armenia, but that he could receive the crown from a Roman representative in Syria just to make things look nice. How does that sound? But Nero is a diva, as we all know.
Yeah.
And Nero says, no, you need to come all the way to Rome, and then I will grant you kingship. Because I am the Roman emperor, I will give you this.
Don't like this. Yeah.
So he refuses the deal, but sends gifts back to Parthia saying, if you improve your conditions, we can still make peace. It'll be fine.
Yeah, like I'm not saying no, but agree to my terms, I guess.
Yeah. Also, it's likely that the Romans didn't want to make peace just after being defeated, because that looks bad.
Yeah.
it looks like they wanted to try a counterattack and call that a victory and say, okay, we managed to win these concessions from the Parthians. We weren't defeated and had to give up Armenia.
Yeah. Which, like, I'm sorry, that's just not what happened, you guys. Skill issue.
So Nero sends commands to Corbulo and gives him supreme command of the East, comparable with what Pompey had back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of power.
Yeah. Well.
And 4 to 5 legions to attack and destroy several Armenian forts. So the Romans march into Armenia. They take some of the border fortifications, but there's no explosive breakthrough to make them take Armenia itself.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, tired of all the fighting, everybody just wants to have some peace and be done with this. Vologases proposed a meeting with Corbulo. Now, he proposes the meeting on the exact site where the previous Roman army had surrendered, a place called Rondia.
Okay.
Which is just a power move, because you just go to the place where your enemy was defeated and say, okay, now sign the peace here, please. It's good stuff.
Well, we had to choose a place, so, you know.
Yeah, we had to choose a random place. You were on the way, might as well go for it.
I promise you it was at random. It happened to be convenient.
So there they finally agreed that Tiridates had not suffered a defeat, and that he would get to keep Armenia. And if Nero really had to be a petulant baby about it, then fine, Tiridates could go all the way to Rome to receive his crown. How does that sound? So there was a large ceremony in front of both.
He still gets the crown, right? So
yeah, he still becomes king of Armenia. Yeah. Just, Nero gets to make a show of it.
If that's what it's gonna take.
So at last, finally, in a ceremony in front of the Parthian and Roman armies, Tiridates removes his crown, places it at the feet of a statue of Nero in late 63, and at last the war is over.
Okay, for real?
And the good news is that it has long-term effects. Because it finally decides that Armenia is going to be under an Arsacid ruler from now until Armenia stops existing.
Let's go.
It is ours, Ariel. We have Armenia.
We made it. Guys, we made it. It only took how many centuries?
2 centuries. It'll be fine.
200 years.
I mean, this doesn't solve anything, but still.
Yeah,
it solves some things. We'll see. But the good news is that Armenia will be under Arsacid control for the next 400 years. And mild spoilers, the Arsacid dynasty will live longer in Armenia than it did in Parthia. So they will outlive the main dynasty.
Of course. Yeah. No, that tracks.
Because reasons.
Yes. Yeah.
And, well, not only that, the great news is that now Vologases has 2 permanent allies in the west. So he has his brother Pacorus in Media Atropatene, which connects Parthia to Armenia. And then he has his brother Tiridates ruling over Armenia. So these 2 kings owe him their throne, and they are a strong base of support against the Parthian nobility. Because if the family owns 2 extra kingdoms, it'll be easier for them to fight against the nobles and keep royal power strong. So now, basically, the threat of the constant civil wars that we've seen at the beginning of the century has been eliminated because Vologases now has backup kingdoms he can use, and he has stabilized the empire at last.
Incredible.
So, the Armenia situation has been solved. But first, Tiridates needs to go to Rome. Let's see how that goes.
Oh, God.
Because Tiridates apparently took about 3 years to travel. Took him 3 years to get all the way to Rome, because first he went to his brothers to celebrate, because, why not? Sounds good.
Yeah. I mean, we better celebrate.
Yes. He then visited his mother in Atropatene, because sounds good. He then decided to travel entirely at Roman expense with 3,000 Armenian horsemen, slowly making his way to Rome, touring all the countryside and basically having a triumphal procession.
I mean,
through Roman lands.
They told us we had to go over there, so
yeah, so
we would have been happy
might as well.
To not.
Let's go. Tiridates then meets Emperor Nero, and there's a bit of a kerfuffle at that point because kerfuffle indeed. Because, well, Tiridates, as a proud Parthian man, always carries a dagger on himself. And the Romans say, give up your dagger before meeting the emperor.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Fair enough. But Tiridates refuses to give up his dagger, so he finds a solution. You know what? He is going to nail the dagger to his sheath as a guarantee of safety, but he'll still carry his dagger while meeting the Roman emperor.
Yeah. I think it's a good compromise.
And then finally, there were great gladiatorial games in Tiridates' honor, where apparently Tiridates was annoyed at having to sit in the crowd and not hunt like a king does. So he just took his bow and shot at the wild animals in the arena and killed 2 bulls with 1 arrow.
How?
Don't know. Fast arrow or thin bulls. One of the two.
How the okay, yeah, sure. That happens, definitely.
Yeah, so Tiridates, makes a good show. It's not the Colosseum yet, but in the nice arena, he manages to just show that he is an Armenian king and he can kick butt with the best of them. And then finally, at the end of the gladiatorial games, Tiridates was declared king of Armenia and crowned by Nero, who was wearing triumphal robes for the triumph he didn't win.
Yeah.
But,
This is so weird to me, because it's
like
happy. You're making a whole thing about still having to concede to someone else that, like, they are the king of the place that you could not,
Yes.
So, like, how is this better, actually?
It's just better optics, I guess. If you're a random peasant in Rome and you see the Roman emperor crowning a king, you think, yeah, sure, I guess we won. That. He's king because we chose it.
Sure. I don't
know
what to tell you. Like, it just... I don't know.
It's basically theater for the Romans.
Yeah.
It's just for them to feel better about themselves while they did lose Armenia.
It's like, we can live in our made-up world. It's fine. We can be delusional about it. That's ridiculous.
And then finally, Tiridates managed to triumphantly march back to his new kingdom and start a dynasty that would last 400 years, which, good stuff. We're also told by Cassius Dio that Nero invited Vologases himself to Rome for a meeting. And Vologases, he doesn't want to look like a suppliant king. He is the king of Parthia. He defeated Nero. What are you doing? No, I'm not going to come. But Nero just constantly said, no, please, come on. Come and visit me in Rome. It'll be fine. I'll host you. It'll be great.
Trust me.
And then, in the end, Vologases was exasperated by these constant requests and wrote to Nero, it's far easier for you than for me to traverse such a great body of water. So, if you will come to Asia, we can arrange that where we shall still be able to meet each other. So he's basically saying, I'm not coming to your empire. You're coming to my empire.
Yeah. But then he's being like, oh, but you're just, your naval capacity, you're just so much better. Like, it would just be easier for you.
Yeah, he's being nice about it. Yeah, he's saying, well, it's easier for you to cross the Mediterranean than for me, so come all the way to Syria, please. So Nero refused, so both of them really denied each other the propaganda victory. And everybody just said, fine, but we still have Armenia, screw you. Also, just for closure, Nero became jealous and fearful of Corbulo, who had, if he had been left more control, he probably would have done better in the war. Yeah. And Nero orders his execution, but hearing this, Corbulo killed himself first. Which is why we don't hear of Corbulo in the Year of the Four Emperors, because
he's not there.
Gone.
Yeah. Tends to happen.
Yes. So peace at last, and Vologases has managed to gain a brother on the coveted Armenian throne, and not only that, the throne will not be contested for the next 50 years.
Wow.
Which means that Vologases has bought a generations-long peace for the people of his empire, which is great for everybody living there, not so great for us because the sources will be decreasing, but hey, at least the people there are happy. But okay, so how does Vologases now rule the empire? Because we get an interesting look at his religious policy in this period.
Mm-hmm.
Because following the example of Artabanus III, he starts to distance himself from the old Hellenistic period and embrace a more Iranian identity. Because for the first time, he mints coins that show a man, presumably the king, making offerings towards a Mazdaean fire altar. No longer the Greek divinities are shown there, or just the archer. And he also adds Pahlavi writing to the coins, and the Greek fades away, which hints at the fact that Greek is no longer being used as an administrative language. The privilege of the Greek city-states in the empire has been decreasing enough in this century that now there's a fully Parthian administration which can better govern everything. Also, according to Zoroastrian tradition, Vologases ordered a collection across the empire of the scattered written and oral traditions of the Avesta, which is basically the Zoroastrian holy book. So he is compiling this. Although we're not sure how historical this is because it would be formalized a few centuries later by the Sassanids. So he is organizing things. We're then told that Nero began to mass forces for an eastern expedition. We're not sure if it was against the Parthians or maybe against the nomadic Alans that lived north of the Caucasus. But in the end, Nero was overthrown and killed in the year 68, and the Romans were too busy fighting themselves to be of any real threat.
That tracks, actually.
At the same time, it looks like Vologases did nothing to stop his Jewish vassal king from aiding the Jewish people in their revolt against the Romans, which, helped tie the vassal closer to Parthia in an anti-Roman function, which is always nice. Later on, Vologases then received a letter during the Roman Civil War. It was from a man called Vespasian. And Vespasian sent a letter to Vologases saying, hey, please be neutral during the Civil War. I'm going to try to become emperor. How does that sound?
Right. We're like, hey, let's work together here.
Yes. At that point, Vologases remembered all those times the Romans tried to put one of their usurpers on the throne of Parthia. And he thought, why don't we try to put a Roman usurper on the Roman throne? Can we do that? Is that a thing we can do?
I love that.
Yes.
What if we do the same?
Yeah, what if you do the same now that you guys are in a civil war? Yeah. It's not so fun when we do it, is it?
Huh?
So he writes back to Vespasian and says, no, we're not going to be neutral. If you want, we can give you 40,000 cavalrymen to help you win the civil war.
Not only are we not going to be neutral, we're going to help you.
Yes.
How does that sound?
But unfortunately for us, the offer was politely refused by Vespasian.
Aww.
Because Vitellius's main army was defeated, Vespasian was winning anyway by that point, so he didn't really need this, and he didn't want to look like, a Parthian pretender. But also in the letter, Vespasian is very nice. He refuses by emphasizing his desire for peace with Parthia, basically confirming that he would maintain the peace treaty for Armenia, and we're not going to fight over it again. We are going to remain stable. Everything is going to be as it was. You can also read this offer of help by Vologases as a subtle threat, because he is basically saying, we can spare 40,000 soldiers just as a gift to you.
Yeah.
Which means that, imagine what happens if we get angry. We have a lot more than these 40,000 to beat your butt with. But in any case, Vespasian won the civil war. Vologases sent envoys to the Senate to ask that they officially honor the memory of Nero, likely to ensure that the treaty with Armenia is respected. And there is some snark in the letters they send each other because...
There always is.
Yeah, because Vologases opened a letter to Vespasian as Arsaces, King of Kings, to Flavius Vespasian, greetings. While Vespasian replied to the letter as Emperor Flavius Vespasian to Arsaces, greeting.
Yeah, of course.
So
you gotta.
We've seen this before, but
this is how it works.
It's good to call each other by dumb names. But overall, it looks like the relationships were cordial, and Vologases offered Titus, the son of Vespasian, a crown and congratulations on his victories over the Jewish rebels, and Titus accepted the gift. So things are going well. We're doing happily enough. So this all allowed Vologases internal peace, which he used to reduce the power of the recently rebellious Greek cities, build up a series of fortifications to avoid the nomads from invading the heart of the empire, and he fully annexed the vassal kingdom of Karakine to secure the Persian Gulf trade and avoid having to deal with vassals that you never know whose side they're going to be on.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it also looks like the kingdom of Elymais had sort of slipped away from central authority during the dark times, so Vologases brings them back to the fold and imposes one of his cousins on the throne. At the same time, if we look at trade, the Silk Road has been going strong and increasing in importance, but also spreading out. Because due to the frequent civil wars in the Parthian Empire, there's a new Indian route which is being pursued to avoid the risks and costs of having to maybe cross a war zone. But Vologases tries to ensure that this Indian trade route can, have ports along in the Parthian Empire, make sure that everything is still going through us. And then he decided to found a series of new cities. He founded the city of either Vologasia or Vologases, depending on the source, near Babylon, to establish a new trading center to rival Seleucia without being as volatile, so again, sapping power away from them. And also changes in the course of the Tigris River meant that Seleucia was more and more inaccessible by river. So, Vologasia has this better access to the river, which gives logistical reasons for it. And all of this, together with the increased political importance of the city of Ctesiphon, sped up the decline of Seleucia in favor of these cities that had been founded by Parthians, actually. In the east, it looks like the Indo-Parthians, who ruled the Indus Valley, were brought back into the orbit of the Parthian Empire, presumably as vassals, because their iconography tends to copy the features that Vologases coins have. So they changed their writing from Greek to Pahlavi, and they have an overall model looking similar. So everything is going quite well. The empire is prospering, strong, and united. But things would become a little bit sticky in 72, because surprising absolutely everyone, the problem was not Armenia this time, but it was another vassal kingdom called Commagene.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
interesting.
That's nice.
Bit of a change.
Yeah. Because this little kingdom was a small ruler at the west of the Euphrates River that controlled one of the best crossings over the Euphrates. And so it's great for anybody that wants to cross from Mesopotamia to Syria and vice versa.
Yeah, that's usually the case. Like some strategical position geographically that will,
So the Roman governor of Syria, trying to avoid this alliance, trying to stop this crossing from happening, attacked the kingdom of Commagene by surprise, forcing the king to flee. The kingdom was then quickly occupied and was absorbed by the Romans into the empire, combined by an increase in Roman legions in the area. In the end, Vologases didn't really intervene because he thought, yes, it's not great, but they were Roman vassals since Mark Antony, and it wouldn't really be politically justifiable to start a whole new war with Rome over this tiny little river crossing. It'll be fine.
Sorry. I apologize. My brain just went wild on that one.
And yeah, this annexation is also part of a broader Roman policy of absorbing the last client kingdoms it had in Anatolia to make sure that it would be easier to control, and also it stops them from having to deal with dynastic politics. And having seen what happened to Armenia, it stops these kingdoms from getting an Arsacid prince and shifting into the Parthian fold. So the borders are consolidating now. This all coincided with an invasion of Alans from the north.
Of Alans?
Yes, Alans.
Oh no, not the Alans.
Yes. Because they came roughly from the Sea of Azov, and they allied themselves with the Iberians and crossed into Atropatene, where they defeated Vologases' brother Pacorus and headed west into Armenia, defeating and almost capturing Tiridates before turning to Parthia directly. Apparently, somebody threw a net over Tiridates and tried to drag him away, but the king managed to
What?
Yes. It was an intense battle. They just caught him like a fish.
Wow.
But he managed to cut his way out with his sword and was saved.
Like, I knew this was a thing in gladiatorial games, right? But
apparently, when you want to capture a king, it happens. So in the year 75, Vologases wrote a letter to Vespasian saying, hey, do you mind helping? These barbarians are marauding across our empire. And specifically requested that one of his sons lead the army and help him. And it looks like Domitian particularly wanted to go and was really raring to fight these barbarians. And yeah, it looks like this is less likely Vologases' last attempt, but more probably he wanted to test the Romans' relationship and, if possible, find a way to influence one of the heirs of Vespasian. And, it's always nice to have a Roman pretender on hand. But Vespasian sent neither and replied that he didn't want to interfere in an internal Parthian matter, and so he just fortified the Roman area, officially against the Alans, but potentially in view of a Parthian conflict.
Dang, these Alans.
Yes. In the end, we don't really hear more about this situation, but we can assume the Vologases dealt with it. It's just annoying we don't really know how. We then get one extra bit of information that is slightly unclear, but it looks like Trajan's dad, who was governor of Syria at the time,
Right.
got triumphal honors for some victory against Parthia, but we don't really know of any fighting that happened. So it might just be that there was a successful negotiation on a border issue and you got a triumph for it.
I mean, that's that's valid.
Good for you. And then we get the next few years are quiet, with Vologases ruling the empire, developing it, ensuring that it trades and prospers, until he has to decide on the succession.
Of course.
In April of 78, we get coins from a new king, Pacorus II, minting his coins at Ctesiphon. But we also get coins from Vologases at the same time, so presumably Vologases, wanting to avoid a succession crisis like has happened so often in recent years.
Yeah, same, honestly.
Yeah. He appoints his son as co-king so that, in his last years, they'll be able to rule together and take power smoothly when he's gone. Not only that, it looks like Vologases had another son called Artabanus that he settled into northern Mesopotamia, trying to follow the tradition he started with his own brothers to stabilize the succession by giving all the brothers minor kingdoms to rule. So having settled everything, having a clean heir, trying to avoid any possible civil wars, Vologases then disappears from history without any further news from him in July of 79.
That's odd.
Presumably dying peacefully, just seamlessly transitioning the empire into the reign of his son.
Wow. That is, really the most disappointing way to go when we just don't have anything, but also the most promising, because that means literally, everything went so smoothly that, there was nothing to add.
Yeah, nobody thought it
here
worth
you go,
noting.
you did the thing. And
yes. Congratulations, Vologases. You have succeeded.
I am, how would you say, skeptical about a certain thing going on with Rome. Because everything has been going so well diplomatically.
Yeah.
But if I remember correctly...
We did get a 50-year peace. I wonder what happens at the end of the 50 years.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, something happens between the Parthians and the Romans.
Yeah.
And Vespasian
that is in 2 episodes.
Interesting. I guess we shall see. But Vespasian seemed like such a cool dude. I mean, he was doing great, so I don't think we'd have anything against him, personally.
Vespasian seems doing fine. He's alright. He's all cool. He's just become emperor, and now we're going to transition to Titus and Domitian, and it'll be fine.
Uh-huh. Good.
It's going to be cool, Sarah. Don't worry.
Great. Okay. Well,
nothing bad is going to happen in around the 110s.
No. Who knows?
So what are your thoughts about Vologases? What you expected, more or less sideways?
He was really cool. I honestly, not necessarily what I expected, because I don't really know what I expected. I guess something more dramatic. But it's such a relief to have a competent guy who actually gets to do things. And honestly, for the most part, I guess makes the right decisions. And keeps things together and helps to, smooth things over and makes everything a bit more pleasant for everybody.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, in the last 50 years, we've had only one king rule more than 5 years.
Yeah, exactly.
More than 10 years, actually. But yeah, it's still been a lot. And yeah, now Vologases manages to finally restabilize the empire, and we have
That's what I mean. It's not that
with Rome.
He suddenly, changed the entire empire and conquered another equivalent amount. No, it's just we've been doing terribly, honestly. We've been on fire for so many years. So let me just put the fire out and reconstruct everything that got burned down and help to secure some things that were a bit iffy and could be a problem in the future. And yeah, okay, everything is now clean and spotless and perfect, and we can continue now. That's amazing. Yeah. I'm so happy.
Good stuff. Yeah. So, nice. Are you ready to rate him, Serial?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Nice. Our first category is final moments. How interesting was his death? Just disappearing into history.
Not at all, sadly. This is not
No,
his category.
Yeah, we have no information whatsoever, but, you know, it is a positive sign. Not great for a score, but hey. Yeah, I think I'm going for a 0 because we literally know nothing.
Same. We don't really have anything. It's just...
Yeah, so with a 0 and a 0, we get a 0 out of 10 for final moments. Our next category is battle hardness. How good was he at war and fighting? Well, he did a lot of fighting.
Yeah,
he had
amazing.
So much fighting to do. So, well, what did he do? Okay, so, well, he invaded Armenia. Let's start with that. He conquered Armenia once and gave it to his brother. Excellent start.
We love
He
that.
then had to move away to fight a war in the east, which, given that we find that the Indo-Parthians are then on his side, presumably it went well. We have no detail about it except that it happened, but we can only assume that he was victorious.
No detail also means no terrible things, so...
Yeah. He then went back to Armenia and went head-to-head with the Romans. He reconquered Armenia a second time and managed to make sure that it was properly under control. He managed to be so successful that the Romans accepted to just hand over Armenia in exchange for a symbolic gesture.
Yeah, that is incredible.
So that's pretty good. That's better than anyone else has done recently. He then had to fight a quick civil war with either a son of his or a cousin.
Yeah,
and
which
he wins that.
Happens.
Goes there. It's good. So he succeeds there again. He then has to fight with the Alans. He manages to defeat them. Again, no detail, unfortunately, but he wins where his brothers failed. And I think it's overall a very good record. I don't think there's anything that's, immediately incredibly impressive, but he defeats a fully equipped Roman army and manages to get them to back down. That's good. That is a good sign. Yeah, so he defeats the Romans, wins 2 civil wars, wins in the east, and defeats some barbarians invading from the north. Those are 5 things already. And I think that the conquest of Armenia is very impressive.
Yeah.
The conquest of the east is also quite impressive. I feel like I don't feel like this is like a 9 or 10 territory, but definitely 7 or 8. What are your thoughts?
I think it's pretty incredible, especially with how things have been going and how difficult it is. Because it's not like we haven't tried to do these things before. We just couldn't.
It's been difficult, yes.
So, I'll go for an 8. I'm very impressed. Like, it wouldn't be as impressive in, like, any other period, I guess. Like, it really depends where you put it. But I think for right now, pretty incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I think you convinced me because it's not just what he's doing, it's what he's doing with the starting point he had. Like,
exactly.
It's not like Alexander the Great where he starts with the most efficient army the Greek world has ever seen and he gets to use it. It's Vologases who just starts up with, the empire has been on fire for 50 years and I have to deal with it now.
I have a chance now.
Oh, great, now we have the empire.
Talk about rising to the occasion.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, so with an 8 and an 8, he gets a 16 out of 20 for battle hardness, which is our highest score in like 8 episodes.
Yeah,
so,
that
good job.
Tracks. That tracks.
Our next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulations? We don't really get much scheminess in him. We get some vague glimpses, but it's not too much. You could say the offer to support Vespasian as a Parthian pretender to the Roman throne is an interesting attempt, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And again, I don't know if you'd call that schemy or just regular diplomacy. And then otherwise, from his personal life, we can assume that he schemed to make himself be elected king when his father was a relatively unknown old guy. And otherwise, everything else he does is pretty straightforward. Just, conquer the empire, make sure it's stable, and make sure it works. But there's not much subterfuge. I'm wondering if there's if a 1 is worth anything, or if it's just there. What do you think? Is there anything that pops to mind?
If he didn't, like, murder his father, which would also be, like, not that relevant. I don't think there was much,
Yeah, it was just did a fine job, but yeah.
He did great with what he had, and he didn't really need to weasel his way in somehow, or...
yeah, he just did everything above
the entire,
board.
like, exchange with Rome, right? Of, like, come over here, or we go over there.
Yeah.
But, like, that wasn't even, double-faced or somehow, like, misleading. It was just, like, let's see how we can find a compromise and not look bad, and make them look as bad as possible.
Yeah, I don't think I'd qualify him as a schemy person. He just does everything fine. I think I'll just go with a 0, really. You matching?
Yep.
Okay, so with a 0 and a 0, he gets a 0 out of 20 for scheminess. Our next category is shock factor. How shocking was this man? It's the main shocking thing is that he succeeded.
Yeah.
Is that he
the main shock is that he did great.
Collapse, yeah. Main shock is that
not that
everything
we
went
didn't
well.
believe in him or anything, but, like, judging by how things have been.
Yeah, shock factor. Again, he doesn't really murder anybody. He does the opposite. He just gives his brothers nice, cushy jobs so that they will, rule their own kingdoms and they can be friends. He does concede that Tiridates has to go to Rome to get his crown, but who cares, really? You have Armenia for the next 400 years. That sounds good enough. So it's kind of, again, shock factor. I don't think he did much. Did he do anything? I can't think of anything bad that he did. Not bad, but, that would be shocking. Like, all he did was above board. All he did was in order. He didn't go for massive massacres of civilians. He just, generally improved things. So I think I'm also going for a 0. I don't know if you can think of anything else, but... yeah, it's just...
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we can go for a 0. So with a 0 and a 0, he gets a 0 out of 20 for shock factor. Our next category is his category. It's Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire in general and Iran in particular? Well, he did good things. So first of all, let's just look at it on a map. On a map, he conquered Armenia. Armenia is ours. Hooray. Or at least, it's our brothers, but still, you know what I mean. He then managed to get peace in the east. He managed to bring the Indo-Parthians into the fold. He managed to win 2 civil wars. He managed to stabilize the empire after decades of political instability. Now they're back, and unlike Artabanus, he wasn't dethroned and had to come back 2 times. Vologases was always in charge, and any threat was dealt with. So he's managed to get Roman recognition of Armenia. The Romans, we will be at peace for 50 years. We have good cordial relations with Vespasian, and everything is fine. And then economically, he is making sure that the trade routes are flowing through the empire. He is taking control over all of Mesopotamia so that trade will have an easier time flowing through there, and he'll have better control over it. He ensures that his brothers have jobs. He keeps the succession stable during his own reign. And then for his sons, he has one of them made king while Vologases himself is king, and keeps, everything in order. And then he gives kingdoms to his other sons so that they won't rebel, ostensibly. Then Vologases founds new cities. He founds Vologasia or Vologasocerta to replace Seleucia and make sure that, 1, we're taking control away from the Greeks, and 2, the city will prosper, so it's more Parthian, it's stronger. And then he reestablishes an Iranian identity for the empire, ensuring that now there is local writing again. The Greeks no longer have all the power that they used to have, and the empire is now strong and stable, and seems that it will do so for at least another generation. Who knows? We'll find out in Pacorus' episode. So, yeah, I think this is really impressive. Again, he started from a low point for the empire and got it back to, the greatest it has been since the old days before Rome started meddling. So I think I'm somewhere around a 9. my argument around why not a 10 is that he improves the empire, but there's nothing radically different. Like, it's much better, but he doesn't, like, rebuild it from the ground up, which is what I feel a 10 would be. But, yeah, I think it's, like, it's a high-quality 9 for me. How about
Yeah.
you?
No, I agree. I wouldn't go for a 10, because they would have to be something extraordinary. Which, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, this was pretty extraordinary, but, like, you know, it hasn't made me go, like, gasp in disbelief. I feel like a 9 tracks.
A 9, yeah.
Yeah.
So with a 9 and a 9, he gets an 18 out of 20 for Aaron Shine, which is our highest score in 15 episodes since Mithridates the Great. So good job, Vologases. You're doing well. Our next category is Face of Faces. What do you think this man looked like?
Well, I will need a minute, but I will...
Yes. Okay, so Cyril has finished their drawing. Let me pick it up and I'll describe it to you all. Nice, I like it. Good,
Yeah.
good strong vibes. So what we have is a very cool looking man. He has the Parthian robe. It has a nice darker hem on a lighter color along the edges of it. It's closed in front. He has nice pants on. He is wearing a diadem and an extremely determined expression. He has a nice long beard and long hair, and he's clapping his hands together, clothes flowing with the motion, and saying, "Right, let's get to work."
Yeah.
So that is very
Lots to
good.
do.
Thank you, Cyril. There's plenty to do, and yes, he did. So, yeah, thank you very much, Cyril. If you want to look at this drawing, you can follow the notes of the episode in the description, or you can go to our website and move to Cyril's portrait gallery and have a look at what he looks like. Now let me show Cyril what his coins look like, and they can tell us, are they impressed? Are they not? What does it look like?
It's another coin. This one on profile.
It's a guy.
Like, it's cute, but we've seen this before. It's the guy with the short-ish beard and the typical hairdo and the diadem and some necklaces, or maybe it's like the top of the robes or something. And that's it.
Yeah, it's just like a guy. His
Yep.
face isn't even especially notable.
How do you know it's him?
It says so on the back of the
Okay,
coin.
because otherwise I don't...
That's the only way you can tell, yeah. Yeah, no, just by looking at him, he could be any other king. I'm a bit disappointed. He could be interesting, but it's just like, I'm impressed we have a coin, but I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. So, yeah, not terribly impressed. What do you think? I'm between a 1 and a 2, really. I'm going to go for a 2 because the coin is well preserved, but that's it.
Like a 2, 1. I mean, 1 would be if it's like barely even recognizable. I guess a 2, because like we still have the
Yeah, I
name,
feel
right?
like
And
you
it's
can
a
see
coin,
it and it's fine, but yeah. it's
if you
not
pick it
really-
up, you can be like, this is this guy
Yeah, you
'cause
could
it says so.
potentially see his face.
on the back.
So I think with a 2 and a 2, he gets a 1 out of 5 for Face of Faces. Our next category is lengthiness. How long do you think he reigned?
I don't... A fair amount, right?
Reigned a bit, yeah.
I'm gonna go higher than I think. I'm gonna say 30 years.
30 years is quite close. He reigned for 28 years.
Let's
so
go!
That's pretty good, yeah.
I was like,
Good
between
stuff.
20 and 30 has to be, so...
Yeah. So he reigned from 51 to 79, giving him a total of 28 years divided by 10. That's 2.8 out of 5 for lengthiness. And that brings us to the final score, which is a grand total of 37.8 out of 100, which places him under Demetrius I and above Diocles. So in the high 30s club, but nothing terribly high. He didn't have too much scheminess going for him. But that doesn't mean that we know the answer of our next question, which is asking, is he restorative enough? Is he successful enough? Is he Armenian enough to be called a Shahanshah, or is he just a Shahanah?
See, I'm not like... him as a person, I'm like... I think his achievements were very impressive.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would tell people about him other than, from this point onward,
Yeah,
things are less
improve.
shitty.
Yeah, the thing
Yeah.
is that you don't really see, reflected in his points, you don't really see much of him as a character. Like, you can see that he's a guy that does good things correctly, but I don't know how. Like, basically, I remember him because he's like, oh yeah, this is when things improve. But I don't remember him because, oh, he did this really cool thing. Let me tell you about it.
Yeah.
But to be fair, playing his advocate, there was also a similar thing for Sinatrukes, and he sort of restored the empire from a state of civil war, and he got it. And we didn't know much about him as a character, except that he was an old man that was very tired and had a cool hat.
Yes.
And also, like, Mithridates I, we don't really know too much about him. I mean, we know about him and Demetrius, so we know more. But yeah, I think it's an ambiguous one. You don't know how it goes. What are you thinking? Do you think he deserves it just for getting the empire back on track? And, he's definitely not going to win at the end. But do you think he deserves at least that honorable mention saying, yes, you're at least in the club with these other people? Or do you think that, nah, he doesn't have that spark, it's not worth it?
I don't want to... I feel terrible saying this, but I'm not convinced. I think he can get an honorable mention, but I wouldn't give him Shahanshah.
You wouldn't give him Shahanshah? Yeah, I also feel bad because he did so well.
He did amazing, but
he's one of our top Ehrenschein scorers.
Yes.
But
I don't care for him otherwise.
Yeah, it's just... we don't get any
as a cinematographical character, that I want to tell people about. I'm like, yeah,
and that's mainly the fault of the sources. I think that, if we knew more, if we knew about an equivalent Roman emperor, he would get it if we had that amount of sources. But I don't feel like we have enough to properly justify giving him a Shahanshah. So it's with great sorrow in our hearts that we say, I'm sorry, Vologases, but you are a Shahanah. You can go off into the desert, tell your father, Vonones, that you tried your best. You really did. The empire works now. Everything is better, but that you're not charming enough. You're charming enough to be voted king, but not charming enough to be voted a Shahanshah. So that leads us to the end of our episode. Thank you for joining us. We hope you had a good time with it. As we are approaching quickly the event that Sarah has been alluding to, we'll see why that happens, what's been going on, who knows. But at the same time, you can see us next time with the episode on Pacorus II and see, will he live up to his father? Will he surpass him? Who knows? In the meantime, if you want to support us, you can support us on Patreon, where for a small monthly payment, you'll be able to have access to a bunch of extra episodes. The last one was Alcibiades. Sarah enjoyed that very much. There we have other episodes on Mithridates the Great of Pontus, Hanwudi of China, Themistocles, Tigranes the Great. So lots of fun stuff to enjoy, and we're going to start voting soon on what the next miniseries is going to be. So if you want your voice to be heard, then follow us on Patreon. And if instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, that's fine, but we also appreciate if you could give us a review on your podcast app of choice to let other people know that we exist and that you enjoy us, so more people can come on. In this year, we've had a great growth as a podcast, but we'd also love for more people to learn that we exist, so that'd be nice.
Yeah, spread the word. The good gospel.
Yes. And so I think that without any further ado, thank you for joining us for this episode, and we hope you have a great week. Goodbye.
Bye.